Hey everybody, Chad Wesley Smith here for Juggernaut Training Systems. This is going to be a video part of our series Powerlifting Cues and What They Mean. So before we get into showing you some of my favorite cues to use with the athletes that I coach, I want you to understand a couple important things about coaching cues. First off, they are a relationship between athlete and coach. So even if you coach yourself, you may need some cues to think of as you approach the bar, and those cues are going to be unique to you. So while I'm telling you the favorite cues that I use with my athletes, you have to realize that this is an understanding between me and the athlete so they know exactly what I mean when I say these words. You might be at a meet and hear coaches yelling all sort of body parts and get tight and this and that at their athletes. And in some cases, those athletes probably know exactly what their coaches mean, but in other cases, the coach might just be yelling words that aren't really helping out in any way. So you want to make sure that whatever cues you use with athletes that you coach, between you and your coach, or if you coach yourself, that you know exactly what it means and what the intent of it is. Also, it's definitely possible to over-cue an athlete. So a simple rule of thumb that we like to use for cueing our athletes is that under 75%, the athlete could have 3 cues per lift. Ideally, we might want to have something that's for the setup, then the descent of the lift, and maybe the ascent of the lift. But those lighter weights, they can think about more because their brain doesn't just go to the weight on the bar, but they can really think about the movement that they're doing. Then from 75 up to 85, maybe 90%, the athlete can have 2 cues that they think about. Ideally, again, for different portions of the lift. Finally, when the athlete gets to over 90%, don't give them more than 1 cue to focus on. If they're thinking about too many things, their mind is going to be, kind of filled with the cue and analysis by paralysis type of situation, rather than being able to just go in and execute what they do every day in training. So when the athlete gets to competition, we should be striving for unconscious competence, meaning that they can go and just execute their technique without thinking about it. You may still give them a specific cue, which is something that they really need to focus on, but when they get in competition, that's not the time to learn technique, and it's certainly not going to be the time that their technique changes. Basically, at that point, you've got the technique you've got, you just need to execute it the best you can. So here are some of our favorite cues to use for the squat, bench, and deadlift. If you find them helpful for you, or you want to talk about them with your coach, go ahead and use them, and hopefully they can help you put some more pounds on the bar. All right, the first cue we want to talk about in the squat is big toe pressure. And since you watch the Juggernaut YouTube channel, you've probably heard Max and I talk about this in several different videos. So if we're using the cue big toe pressure, it's to help correct an athlete who puts their weight too far back in their foot to initiate the squat, or their weight shifts back in their foot during the squat, causing their hips to kick backwards and up, rising faster than their shoulders as they come out of the hole. So when we use the cue big toe pressure, we're usually yelling that at them before they even start the descent, because if you can find your big toe and push it down into the floor as you're still standing upright with the bar, it's easier for you to just stay on it and maintain that pressure throughout the lift. Other similar cues to this would be find your big toe, whole foot pressure. Sometimes if you've used the cue big toe pressure, it could become an overcorrection too much, and maybe you don't have distributed weight on your heel as well. Or one that we've used with Marissa is ground up, or pressure from the ground up. And that's cueing her to really externally rotate her feet and feel tension in the body starting at the feet all the way up. So those are all similar cues, working at the same goal of maintaining even foot pressure, but because there's been so much coaching in powerlifting and information cueing people towards their heels, we've had to sort of overcorrect with that, really emphasizing putting weight on the big toe, and that's going to help you keep your knee forward out of the hole and really effectively use your quads in the squat. All right, the next cue we're going to talk about is maybe the most commonly heard cue at a powerlifting meet is get tight. But what does that actually mean? So the cue get tight is universally used in the sport of powerlifting, but I'm sure you've heard it as an athlete, and some of you are probably not sure what's actually supposed to get tight. So we want to get into that today. So if the athlete is failing to generate tension through their core, through their upper back, That is why the coach is saying get tight, or at least why they should be saying get tight. Some of them are probably just yelling it because they heard other coaches yell it. So if the athlete is kind of crumpling in their midsection, rounding over at the upper back, that's going to be the time where you're saying get tight. And what getting tight should look like is a lot of tension here in the upper back, pulling the shoulder blades together to create a great shelf for the bar. Should be really an uncomfortable position for the athlete. If you've never done it right, if you've never truly gotten tight, it's going to feel like your upper back is ready to cramp up. Then we can extend the cue get tight, especially something we like to use for Marissa is, we'll say ground up, or tightness from the ground up. And that's her externally rotating her feet into the floor, screwing her feet into the ground to create tension in the legs. And then the last part of get tight is going to be about how you breathe. Taking big air in, trying to create 360 degrees of pressure through the obliques, low back, and abs. So that is the famous get tight cue, which you hear at every powerlifting meet. Every coach is yelling it, but I want to make sure you actually understand what it means. So if your coach tells you to get tight, hopefully this is what they mean. You can go more in depth with these cues in our squat pillar series. Part 1 in the squat pillar is going to talk about upper back tightness, and part 2 is going to talk about breathing and bracing. And those are the really foundational elements of the famous cue, get tight. All right, the next cue we're going to talk about is back into the bar. Back into the bar is a cue that we use if the athlete's hips are rising faster than their shoulders out of the hole. It kind of works hand in hand with the big toe pressure cue. We might also say knees forward. All of these cues are going to work in conjunction, so it's whatever one connects best with you. And if you're a coach, you may have to have multiple cues, because some athletes might understand back into the bar, some athletes might understand back and legs together, some people might understand knees forward, but it's all working at the same objective of being active, using your legs and back to lift the weight to get your hips and shoulders rising together. So these first ones Marissa is going to do are what it looks like if you don't get your back into the bar. There we go. And now with the cue back into the bar, Marissa's going to actively drive her upper back into the bar as her first move out of the hole. And you see then the back and the shoulders and hips raise at the same rate throughout the lift. All right, so that is part of our powerlifting cues and what they mean series. If that cue resonated with you, and that maybe that's a technique problem that you're having, then use it, talk to your coach about it, talk to the athletes you coach about it, make sure that you've established a common glossary, that you're speaking the same language when you use these cues, and if it helps fix your technique, great. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to our channel, like it, share it, do all that good stuff. We'll see you next time.